I'm Belen, and I've been labeled. And you may be wondering, what do I mean by labeling? Well, labeling for me is allowing what others say or think about me define who I am and what I am. And it's society's way of feeling good about themselves. And when I talk about society, I include myself in there because as much as I've been labeled, I know that I have labeled others. And not all labeling is negative. There is labeling that is necessary for identifying products, for identifying objects, for identifying what people do in life, like a doctor, a nurse, a lawyer. Those are necessary. What I'm talking about is the destructive form and how that destructive form has transformed my life and how I've allowed it to define who I am. Even though I've been labeled in many different types and form, and not all of them in a negative way, there are three of them that I can truly say have impacted my life tremendously. And the first one is when I was a child growing up. I was maybe about 10 or 11, and I remember my mom saying that I would not amount to anything. I can honestly say that at that time I didn't know what those words meant. I can't say that I felt something, that I felt pain, or that I felt I don't remember. I just don't remember either that I've decided to block that out, or just that it just at that time didn't mean anything, didn't register with me. But somehow I believe that it has, because I look back at my life now and those words are part of it. I see those words coming up in different times in my life. So as a child, I wasn't easy. I mean, I was a rebel. I did what I wanted when I wanted. And if I was told not to do it, I would do it. If I wasn't allowed to do it, I would do it. And if you told me I couldn't do it, I would do it anyways. So I took that and ran with it. And the words, I would not amount to anything, pretty much dictated my late childhood and my early teenage years. I lived a pretty destructive teenage life, and by choice. I was the one that chose to live it that way. And at 19, I got pregnant and gave birth to my son. And at that time, I didn't know uh, if I was going to keep him. The one thing I did know is that I was going to give birth, but I didn't know if I was going to keep him and raise him or give him up for adoption. And I chose to keep and raise him. I was 19. I can barely take care of myself. And now I had this little tiny human being, this beautiful thing, and I didn't know what to do. I chose not to continue the relationship with his father, and I also chose not to pursue and tell his father that I had actually given birth and um, chosen to raise the child. And there goes another label, unwed mother. So I wasn't amounting to anything, and I was an unwed mother. But it doesn't stop there, because my son is black. His father is black, and he does have his dad's um, DNA in him, so he is partially black. And so that was another label, and that was something really rough to go through. Not not for me as a mother, because I didn't see him that way, and I still don't, and I still have a hard time um, identifying or um, seeing how others can judge people just by the color of their skin. And I guess that would be a totally different video in itself. Uh, but I remember my son, when he was about 3 or 4, I had signed him up to start to learn how to skate, because up here in Canada, hockey and skating go together, since we spend 6 or more months out of the year in cold. So I signed him up, and parents were allowed at that time to go into the locker room and help the children with their equipment and putting on their skates and all that. So I walk, I will walk in with my son, and I don't know if it was because I was a woman or because I was walking in there with a black child. Um, but I always had this feeling that people were staring at me, but I didn't know why. And I pretty much ignored it, or I thought I did. And one day, as we're sitting and I'm putting on my son his equipment and starting to tie his skates, this little boy comes and sits right next to my son. And about 2 seconds later, his father comes and goes, "No, I don't want you to sit next to him." And I would have probably ignored it if he would have said, "No, let's change." But it's what he said. He said, "I don't want you to sit next to him." At that point, I just said, like, I was in total shock. I said, "Really? Like, why? How can another parent say that about another child and say that to his own child, that he doesn't want him to sit next to this person? He's a child. He's not a menace. He's not a object. He's another human being." And I think that's the first time that I really became aware that racism still existed, even in 1985. And I just couldn't believe it, because for me, there was no difference. And I mean, in my family, there was no difference. All my family's white. But for them, there was absolutely no difference between my son and my niece and my nephew. They were all loved the same way. So that really hit me really hard, and especially when my son looked at me and he said, "Why did his daddy say he doesn't want him to sit next to me?" My heart broke. I think what I said is, it's not about you, it's about him. And I just put my head down, because I just didn't want him to see the pain in my eyes, because I didn't want him to feel that pain. And I think that's the first time that I really realized that his life was not going to be an easy one, because of how he was labeled. And after that, um, you know, I just taught him that, he was enough, and he was just who he was, and it wasn't the color of his skin, and he was just to go and do whatever he wanted when he wanted.